I'd like to call the Tuesday, March 8th, 2022 Wilson School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Dr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCrae?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mrs. Cocker?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge to the flag. Our first item for in communication this evening, we would like to welcome Mary Lennon and the cast of Guys and Dolls, who will be performing a few selections from their upcoming musical performance.
Hi, my name is Ashley Widener, and I am currently the president of the Wilson Theater Company. I would first like to thank you all for allowing us to perform for you in a few minutes, but I would like to talk a little bit about what we've been able to achieve these past 2 years. When COVID hit, many theater programs all across the country were forced to cancel their productions completely. With your help, we were able to provide the community with live theater and continue to show the world what we absolutely love to do while still remaining safe. Since coming back from the pandemic in late 2020, we've been able to put on 7 main stage performances, with our 8th coming up next week. Just this school year alone, we have put on 3 super successful performances. We have been very fortunate to be able to rehearse and share our passion for theater with the community, and we have been working for months on our next production, which is Guys and Dolls. Our performances are March 17th, 18th, and 19th, all at 7 p.m. As a little sneak peek, we've brought along our crapshooters to perform 2 songs, Guys and Dolls and Luck Be a Lady. Again, thank you guys so much for your constant support of the Wilson Theater Company, and we hope to see you all at Guys and Dolls next week.
Yes, it's too bad that smart businessman like Nathan has to go and fall in love with his own fiancée.
That is his weakness. And we should be tolerant, for I am told it is a worldwide weakness. Look. What's playing at the Roxy? I'll tell you what's playing at the Roxy.
Rehearsal tracks.
A picture about a Minnesota man so in love with a Mississippi girl that he sacrifices everything and moves all the way to the Roxy. That's what's happening at the Roxy.
What's in the daily news? I'll tell you what's in the daily news. A story about a guy who bought his wife a small groupie with what otherwise would have been his union. That's what's in the daily news.
What's happening all over? I'll tell you what's happening all over. Guys sitting in front of his television set, which once used to be something a rover.
That's what's happening all over. Love is a thing that has victims, and it looks like Nathan's just another victim.
Yes, sir. When you see a guy reach for stars in the sky, you can bet that he's doing it for some time.
When you spot a John waiting out in the rain, chances are he's insane, as only a John can be for a Jane.
When you meet a gent paying all kinds of rent for a flat that can flatten a Taj Mahal.
Call it sad, call it funny, but it's better than even money that the guy's only doing it for some dough. When you see a Joe saving half of his dough, you can bet they'll be making it for some dough.
When a bum buys wine like a bum can afford, it's a cinch that the bum is under the thumb of some little boy.
When you meet a mug, lately out of the jug, and he's still lifting platinum Valderrama. Call it hell, call it heaven, it's a probable 12 to 7 that the guy's only doing it for some dough. Cash has run short, make a bet that he's banking it for some dough.
When a guy wears pale sprinkled one in white, who the hell do you think he's tickling think on Saturday night?
When a lazy snob takes a good steady job, and he smells from Vitalis and Barbasol. Call it dumb, call it clever, but you can get odds forever. That the guy's only doing it for some doll, some doll, some doll. That guy's only doing it for some doll.
What's the matter, Scott? Dirty chicken? You've seen me roll for 100 G's, but I've got a little more than dough right on this one.
Rehearsal
Lady
tracks.
luck, lady luck, but there is room for doubt. At times you have a very unladylike way of running out. You're on the stage with me, the pickings have been rushed. And yet before this evening is over, you might give me the brush. You might forget your manners, you might refuse to stay. And so the best that I can do is pray. Luck be a lady tonight.
Rehearsal tracks.
Luck be a lady tonight. Luck, if you've ever been a lady to begin with, luck be a lady tonight. Luck, let a gentleman see how nice a day you can be. I know the way you treated other guys you've been with, luck be a lady with me. A lady doesn't leave for escort, it isn't fair, it isn't nice. A lady wouldn't wander all over the room and blow on some other guy's dice. So let's keep the party polite. Never get out of my sight.
Rehearsal tracks.
Stick with me, baby, I'm the fella you came in with. Luck be a lady. Luck be a lady. Luck be a lady.
Luck be a lady tonight. Luck be a lady tonight. Luck if you've ever been a lady to begin with. Luck be a lady tonight.
Luck, let a gentleman.
Luck, let a gentleman see how nice a day you can be. Luck be a lady, a lady, be a lady with me.
Rehearsal tracks.
She had a heart, she had a soul. A lady
Roll
wouldn't
on, snake eyes, roll on. So let's keep the party polite. Never get out of my sight. Stick here, baby, stick here, baby. Luck be a lady,
Luck be a lady.
luck be a lady. Roll with you, what's the matter? Roll the dice. Coming out, coming out, coming out, coming out right. Ha!
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. We hope you will support the Wilson Theater Company by purchasing tickets to one of their performances on Thursday, March 17th, Friday, March 18th, or Saturday, March 19th. All performances are at 7 p.m. and located in the high school auditorium. Thank you. Okay, communication from JROTC.
Yes, Dr. Trickett, can you please come forward and introduce our speakers this evening who are going to share an exciting new program?
Absolutely. Before I get into that, just a quick note that earlier today we had the opportunity to be at a job fair and had the good fortune of meeting quite a few exceptional music educators. So while we heard the theater department tonight, many of these students also study music, have studied music through our program the entire way through. So really excited about getting some good candidates here before our board in the future meetings. So the conversation for tonight, the presentation for the community and the board, is focused on how to, again, redefine readiness for our kids, to look at the future needs in our community across the country, and try to make sure that we're personalizing options and opportunities for our kids here within our school district. And since Major New came to our school district last year, has really just embraced the role of a senior junior ROTC instructor here within our school district, trying to rebuild the program, rebuild enrollment. And one of the things that he's very passionate about, along with his staff, is bringing forth an idea, really, for the board and the community to hear for the first time today on a comprehensive 4-year program focused on cybersecurity. So he's going to talk about how this program is similar to, a little bit different from what we currently do, how students from across our school would have access to this program, and kind of talk through a little bit of what the process is to get it off the ground. I also want to take a moment to remind our community that we are partnering with some other local school districts in providing junior ROTC experiences for them, and this is another possible option for us to continue that level of partnership within our community. So, Major New.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to brief you this evening. On behalf of Mrs. Edith Pickens, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, Lieutenant General Stephen Fogarty, Commanding General United States Army Cyber Command, and Lieutenant Colonel Geis, Junior ROTC Director, and Dr. Tommy Morris, University of Alabama at Huntsville. I look forward to introducing you tonight to the Junior ROTC Cyber Program. With me tonight is Sergeant First Class Retired Oman Gonzalez. In addition to being my assistant, he has all the required credentials and certificates and college degree, which enables us to be considered for the cyber program. And I'll get into how the selection goes as we go forward. But before I continue with the slides, I want to thank you for your continued service to the Junior ROTC program over the past 13 years. Because of your leadership and continued unwavering support, this program has developed a great reputation in the community for support in Berks County through the Veterans Day dance, but more importantly, the reputation and how it positively impacts the lives of Wilson students every day by providing them an opportunity to feel connected to the school and the community. Personally, I want to thank you for welcoming me and my family into the Wilson School District family. I am both honored and humbled to speak to you tonight about a great opportunity for our district. The new Junior ROTC Cybersecurity Program has the potential to prepare students to be prepared to enter into a career in cybersecurity. This program nests with the district's vision of a graduating student, a student who is life, career, or college ready. Next slide, please. Next slide. And next, please. This is General Fogarty and his importance on the program. I'll give you a few seconds to read that. All right, next, please. And next. Thank you. Okay. The Army has a term called BLUF, or bottom line up front. Our school has a strong resume to be selected as one of only 72 schools nationwide within the Army Junior ROTC programs to have this program approved. It is not to replace my traditional program, it's to augment and to also provide a complementary system to it. The Army will provide traditional support to my junior traditional program and also to the cybersecurity program. Both programs are committed to providing students with a relevant learning environment to meet only their needs, but also the needs of the community. We have a resident instructor with the required background, training, and experience to be selected. If selected by the Army Junior ROTC Cyber Program, we'll be a member of the 23-24 Cyber Cohort. This program is congressionally mandated. The Army Junior ROTC is required to plan, develop, and support a cybersecurity program at the high school level. The outcome of the program is to identify, develop, and prepare students for either a career in cybersecurity, pursue further college education, or enter into the military. It is their option to do with the education that we provide to them. Next slide, please. Again, this is designed for current high school junior ROTC programs with 2 concurrent programs, as I just mentioned. 1 the traditional and 2 the cybersecurity. Schools do not have to have a junior ROTC program to have this program. The Army is offering it to any program, but they're using us as the gateway and the conduit to get the information out to other schools. The University of Alabama at Huntsville is the lead for curriculum development in concert with the 48 hours of junior ROTC leadership training they already receive and the current cybersecurity industry standards, aligned with all those industry standards to make sure that the students are well prepared for their journey. This program is designed to enhance and successful, and they partner with local and regional cybersecurity organizations. Partner with local colleges and universities to provide college-ready students and allowing them to have a dual enrollment status. What they have found in the initial 12 schools that are in this program right now is the colleges are actually having to adjust their curriculum to the students coming in versus the other way around, where students usually have to adjust to the colleges. So they're getting far more prepared students when they enter into the college ranks, and it's a much better program for everybody involved. Next slide, please. Using a by, with, and through model of cyber education, the end result is a student who is prepared to pursue a career, seek further education, or join the military while developing a mentor-mentee relationship with current industry professionals and academics alike. Next slide, please. Next, there you go. Okay, so what the Army will provide for this. The Army is kind of partnering with districts on this, and they will defer to the district to hire the personnel, but there are caveats with it. The two instructors that we'll be hiring will be junior RTC certified instructors like I currently am. However, the difference is one instructor will be fully funded by the military, the other one will be a cost share like I am. So that's a little bit of the difference. They will also have a mandatory 24-month contract with both of them. However, what tied that with, though, is the relocation allowance. They will pay to relocate those personnel to here through either, what they said is either paid up front or they'll reimburse the school for the money. But there's a program in place for that from what they're getting feedback on that. And the reason why I asked the question of why it has to be two Army instructors is because the way the content's written and who owns the rights to the information and the education is, since they're proprietors for it. That's the reason for that purpose. Next slide. Oh, keep here, please. I'm sorry. The Army will provide up to 24 computers if needed. They will also provide all the switches and other internet requirements for the program. The reason why it's 24 computers is they use a Windows-based system versus the Google Chrome, and they found it did not work. They tried Google Chrome on the systems and it didn't work for them. So to meet that requirement, they will provide the computers and maintain those over the next few years. If selected, the school will partner with the Army Cyber Team, will, in collaboration with the school IT department, will do a complete site survey to confirm the classrooms and determine the support requirements, and then they'll provide that push package down to the schools to make sure that they're required and set up to do the training. The training will not begin unless the instructors are hired, the Army certified instructors are hired. The Army pays for all the certifications and credentials. There will be what we call in the Army TDY expenditures. Army pays for all those. They will go back to Huntsville, Alabama upon hiring and get trained in the curriculum, and they'll be brought forward again to be teaching all that. So while we're in the 23-24 year window, they want to start the hiring in the 22-23 to give the school districts a year and a half or so to get the people hired, because they understand there's a lot of competing requirements to hire cyber personnel. Next, please. What they expected of the schools is to provide a CTE credit or a weighted commensurate to the honors and AP levels courses because of the requirements that the students are maintaining. Students will learn about cybersecurity, and I'll get into the curriculum here in a few minutes. And again, the other requirement for the school is the ability to recruit students on a consistent basis. Now, they understand, the military briefed it to us, they understand their goal is to have 4 or more sections, but they also understand the first year you're not going to have that many. And they understand you probably have 12 students at most in the first year. But they, on the backside, if they want to see a kind of a growth plan or a glide path on how we're going to build that program over time. But they do understand the first year is going to be a little rough getting students in. I'll get into the curriculum again, how that's covered, about how it's a cohort versus maybe have students will come in and come out of the program. I'll cover that, how they'll work through that. Each section is 12 students, if you're wondering. And again, the plan that we have to come up with in the high school level is how we're going to partner with local, regional, and collegiate partners to ensure that guest speakers or internship opportunities present themselves to the students as we go through this. I've already talked to Dr. Weber on this, and he already has a pretty good plan, and we're working with Alvernia and also RAC. And I've talked to and reached out to Lehigh University through the ROTC program to see if we can coordinate something through their computer science program to either offer a dual credit where a student may get a Lehigh University scholarship or an ROTC specific one that he can issue to them and say, okay, you're going to continue on this, and at the end of it, you'll be an Army officer. But we're working through different things on how we can try to manage this and get an effective partnership, since Lehigh is really our closest STEM university in the country. So we're trying to get branches out to them. But we are continuing our normal ones in Berks County. Next slide, please. If approved, I'm sure you're aware of this, the DA Form 3126, because the Army loves their forms and numbers, so I don't have to confuse you, but that's basically the official contract between the school district and the Army. That'll require an amendment, and what they'll add into it is the cybersecurity piece with all the caveats associated with it. Okay, next, please. I'll cover the curriculum overview. This is all the people that are involved with it, all the organizations. Just to highlight one of them, the Cyber Start America. We've already had students doing that right now in the classroom. It's a free program that's designed to get kids kick-started into opportunities in cyber security worlds. It's a computer-based kind of fun environment where it's game puzzle-based and challenges where the students create they're given scenarios and they have to create solutions to it. And if they get the solution, they get a key and then they can move on to the next, but they can't move on until they solve that current problem. The kids enjoy it, it's fun, it's interactive, it's just not something to sit behind, how do I understand coding? They'll teach you through it, they'll walk you through it. And again, they give them tutorials, they give them guides if they get confused, so it helps them really learn it. But the feedback we've gotten from it, Sergeant G's been taking the spearhead with a lot of kids and they really enjoy it and have a fun time playing with it. If they progress through far enough, there are regional competitions, and the goal is a national competition. If they score high enough, they can earn a scholarship in the cybersecurity world. Next, please. Okay, this is the curriculum. Again, all of it's going to be on the Canvas platform and learning management system, and the Army will provide all this in their updates, in their computers whenever they show us. Just like I have what we call Curriculum Manager version 3, which provides all my lesson plans, slides, some preliminary tests, and the ability to create tests and modify curriculum as I need to. It'll be a very similar process to that, but based on the Canvas platform. Next, please. And this is just a sample of what the curriculum looks like inside the Canvas. This is just the introduction to cyber. They'll go through day 1, unit 1, and then classes and different ways they're going to approach it and how the expectations for the students. The students will have access to this on their own account, and they'll be able to play with this and do the assignments off of this platform. And much similar to a college curriculum, the way they do it on a Blackboard or one of those, if you're involved with those. Very similar to that, very user-friendly, couple clicks here or there, and you can model yourself through it. Next, please. Just a continuation of what a 5-day instructional period would look like. Okay, and this is the 4-year model. Excuse the eye chart, there is breakdowns further as we go forward on this, but really, students do not have to have previous computer experience to enter this program. They just have to have a liking for it. It does blend visual learning with kinesthetic learning with an emphasis more on the kinesthetic and team building type of environment, much like we do in our environment in the traditional programs. Students are expected to work in small teams to solve complex problems. They will use a junior ROTC level training that we provide to them as part of it to organize, plan, execute, and assess plans, form a team, create team goals, and solve complex problems, again, in this environment. Students are not expected to pass certification tests while in high school. While they are preparing to complete the test, while they will be prepared to complete the test if required, there's 2 reasons why they don't want them to do the test. The first is these tests are really designed for industry standard professionals who have time to study this and go over it, and it's very in-depth and very deep and complex. The high school students really aren't prepared for that level of this. And the other part of it is if they did pass the certification, by the time they graduated high school, they'd be out of certification. They'd have to take them again. So in a lot of ways, it'd be a waste of money for them or the individuals. But if they want to take them, I mean, Army's not going to say you can't do that. What they would do is, well, here's what you need to study, figure it out, pay for them yourself. If you want to take them on yourself, go ahead. But again, we recommend you wouldn't do it until you're complete. This is a 4-year program starting in 9th through 12th grade, but it's designed to have a lot of flexibility built within that. If a student drops for a year, let's say or a student transfers in, the Army Cyber team has deferred to the school district on how they want to manage the students coming in and out of it. They are not going to dictate, so it has to be 4 years or that's it. As we know, students will come in as 9th grade, change their mind, sophomores, and come back as a junior. They said, well, they'll let that up to us on how we want to manage that and allow them to progress through. Although they do prefer the 4-year model just for the ease and less complexity of that. Next, please. Okay, so this is the year 1. This is what they'll get the first year. They'll get introduction to ethics and cybersecurity, global connectivity. They'll also get at least an introduction to the CompTIA plus certifications, and again, some other things. They'll be focused on what we call the service learning project. We do that already. Some of you are aware, but it's the Vets Dance. They'll be incorporated in that. They'll come up with their own version of it as well. So there'll be kind of two things going on at the same time. Year 2 is a continuation of the technical aspects of the field. So they're learning the foundation and the base on how to put together networks. They'll start getting into some cybersecurity, crime, and law aspects of what it means to be what they call ethical hacker, to start introducing some of those terms to them on how you would progress through that thing. They'll also be introduced to, again, the CompTIA Network Plus certification. Introduction, again, not required to take the test. And then a culminating project in the Python programming boot camp and the service learning capstone. They'll continue a second year of that. Year 3, they'll understand the risk management, it's a little bit of cryptology and system hardening, and basically how to make the systems harder to penetrate. They'll do some pen tests in this as well, and they'll also learn digital forensics, which I think is kind of neat. They'll go, if a computer hacked into, they can go back and figure out where it came from and then work backwards from there. So it's kind of a neat thing. And then threat modeling on how you would attack them. If I would attack you, how would you attack me? Kind of red versus blue, if you will, type of operations. And then again, they'll be introduced more to the the TA certification, or the Security Plus certifications next week. And then in the final year, year 4, they get into the ethical hacking. Again, the legal aspects of that, what that means, how it's done, why it's important. They'll get a little more in the vulnerability scanning, pen testing operations. That's whenever you start looking into the system, how can I get into it? How can I prevent people from getting into my stuff? That's what the team really comes in. So almost, if you want to envision it this way, it's Team A over here versus Team B, and they'll go at it with the moderator in the middle trying to figure out how it all works. But then they'll have a team go over here and team captain, and they'll work through it like that. Most of the programs are set up for that type of interaction, and not necessarily rows on the desk, but they'll be sitting facing complex problems. The other piece of this that's not highlighted is they'll be expected, the Air Force sponsors every year Cyber Patriot, and the Army does it as well, so they'll be expected to do those type of online tests and competitions. They're free of charge. And then they'll be introduced to STEM camps around the country as well. Right now, there's a couple of my cadets who are looking at attending the Navy STEM camp in the summer. It'll be a follow-on of those, and all the service academies offer those camps as well. There is a resident. Most of them are resident, but they get to go up there for a week and enjoy it. And I know Lehigh University does one as well, usually around mid-July. They do one. I had a cadet go down there a couple of years ago. And then they'll do a capstone project, and they get to select a topic of that, and it kind of culminates how they do everything. Okay, this is the timeline that we're looking at. We did the 15. The top 2 are already completed. That's kind of why I'm standing in front of you today. February 12th to 11th, we're completing the slides now with Dr. Weber and Dr. Trickett about the slides. The questions they asked, but basically a lot of the stuff I've reviewed here is how we're going to partner with organizations around the region, and then also maybe in the Philly area, reach down into them and figure out how we can get professionals to come in. The goal and the expectation is to have that partnership either ready to go or already in place, and we're just following in on a plan. And they're just going to expand on that common plan. One of the things about let me revisit the teaching piece, what I talked about earlier on that, as I talked to the military about that, and one of the things they shot back to me was, well, we're not going to allow you to hire, but you can sure have guest speakers. So what they're saying is you can have the ability to have a teacher who's currently in residence here to come in and teach certain classes to allow them to meet the requirements for whatever we need to meet the requirements for. So they kind of left the door open. But the Army has to teach the Army cyber stuff in the lead level stuff. Anyway, sorry, back to, so we're on the complete, we'll submit those no later than Friday, and then sometime between Monday, March 13th through April 12th, they're going to do a follow-on interview with administrators and myself, and then before April 12th, thereabouts, they're going to let us know so we can begin the hiring process, certifications, and all those other insight surveys that we have to do to ensure everything. Again, the reason why it's going to take so long to do this is the Army threw this little, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, it's a CNACI background check. So it's a great acronym, because we love our acronyms, but what it really does is it's an additional one to the state background checks that we're required to do for educators that I had to go through and everyone else has to go through. What it does is it checks the military background. Since a lot of our Uniform Code of Military Justice is not transferable over to the civilian sector, they will check those and make sure that there's nothing in the backgrounds. Because, for example, if somebody got a DUI, if I got a DUI on post, the civilian cops would never know about it. Military does. Or if anything, they have child and youth programs, so you're involved in those. If you were fired from being a coach or discredited for being a coach, or you had an on-post domestic violence or something, they would find out about it. You wouldn't necessarily find out about it. So they'll find those things in your records and ask. When we started this program in 2016, 17, that CNACI came on board, there were about 200 instructors who decided either not to do it, walk away, or they had stuff in their files and said, I'm not gonna fight it. And they walked away. So it did work for what the Army wanted to go for. And some of them one guy had a DUI, he just didn't want to fight it, because all they were looking for was, hey, I did my time, never happened again. But it was when he was a private, like in 1985 or something like that. It's now 2016, so never had another one. But at the same time, that's how far back they go to check everything. So that's what takes so long. That can take anywhere from 90 days to 180 days to get that background check back, based upon when the person retired, because they'll do it then. Okay. Subject to your questions, again, let me just review. Great opportunity for us, only one of 72 schools, hopefully to be selected in this. It does complete the district profile of a graduating student, and it'll further promote the district's reputation as a forward-thinking, proactive educational leader in Berks County, adaptive to meet the needs of the future force in the county and the state, while providing an equitable education experience to all students in the district. And subject to your questions. Yep.
I'm a little confused when you said one of 72, because in your previous slide, you said that you have to go through this process, but we may or may not be approved?
Right. There are 72 schools. The Army allocated 72 programs total. They put 12 in place already for a pilot program, and that's finishing off now. And now they're in the process of selecting the next 70 schools. So right now when I did the VTC with them about 3 weeks ago, I think there were 4 or 5 schools on there with me. The rest of them were a laundry list of people that I didn't even mention on this. So it looks like there's a pretty good chance we'll get it if we would.
Okay, thank you.
That answer your question? Yeah. The reason why it's so hard is when I first got hired, I originally put interest in this. And they came back and said, yeah, that's nice. You're an infantry armor guy. You don't know nothing about computers. When you hire somebody who knows this specific skill set, then come talk to us. Sergeant G happened to walk in the door literally about a week later, and what do you know, it happened. So then we hired Sergeant G and we put it in. But the requirement is to have this program, you have to have what Sergeant G's background is. And they have to be on board. They won't even consider us without him even being hired beforehand. So it's very constricted how well they're going to put this together. And some of it is in concert with the Air Force. They're pretty far ahead on this, and we're kind of catching up a little bit, as the Army is. Any questions? Great. Well, thank you for your time. Dr. Weber and Dr. Trigger will be in touch with if you have any other comments. If you have any questions, please contact me. I'll answer them. Pretty good program. Thank you.
Thank you. 1.6, Mr. Moravich, we don't have any one speaking on agenda items, so we can save that for later. Yep. The board met in executive session prior to tonight's meeting to discuss ongoing property issues. 2.1, approval of minutes. Looking for a motion to request to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on February 22nd, 2022 as attached.
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Do we have a second?
Martin.
Mr. Martin, thank you. Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Payment of bills, Mr. Negrini.
Make a motion to pay from the general fund $2,819,609.12.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Martin.
Mr. Martin, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Faley.
Thank you, President Cocker. Before I get into the superintendent's report this evening, included on that report are, there's one retirement, and I would like to recognize Linda Vicari, who is the secretary at Spring Ridge Elementary, for her 21 years of service to the Wilson School District. She will be retiring at the conclusion of June 30th of 2022. In addition, there are a number of professional hires that the board is going to be voting on, and I would like to introduce them, and many of them are here this evening. The first is Georgianne Ganis, and she will be a special ed teacher at Southern Middle School. Terry Neofok, who is a long-term reading specialist at West. Lori Tranovich, who will be a life skills teacher at Spring Ridge. Connor Moyer, who will be a fourth grade teacher at Cornwall Terrace. Amanda Rawenzon, who will be a world language teacher at West. Sarah Troster, who will be an ESL teacher at Spring Ridge. And I believe I got all of them, so I would like to publicly welcome them to the Wilson School District pending the board's vote on this agenda item this evening, which is my personnel and program recommendations as listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. Looking for a motion to approve superintendent items 4.1 through 4.9 as presented.
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Do we have a second?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any comments? Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
5.1, request permission to approve the high school track and field team traveling to Knoxville, Tennessee on April 14th through 16th, 2022. No cost to the school district, no days out of school for students. Looking for a motion?
So moved, Case?
Mr. Case, thank you. Second? Mr. Hart, thank you. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Consent items. 6.1, requests to accept with gratitude the following donations. From an anonymous donor, up to total of 20 scholarships totaling $1,000 if needed for students in need of financial assistance interested in attending the BCTC camp. From an anonymous donor, 6 copies of a book, Middle School's a Drag, to be distributed 2 copies to each secondary building library. From Ms. Michelle Bortz, retired district employee, a wheelchair for use by the nursing team in one of our district health offices. 6.2, request to accept a grant of $500 from the Reading Symphony Orchestra to be used to further curriculum development, classroom resources, and educational materials for Holocaust and anti-hate education during the 2021-2022 school year. Looking for a motion to approve consent items 6.1 and 6.2 as presented. Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Do we have a second? Casper. Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, under Student Services, 7.1, request approval of the addendum to the service agreement with Austell's Rehabilitation Services, Inc. for occupational therapy and physical therapy services for 3 years, beginning 7/1/22 and ending 6/30/25. 7.2, request approval of a resolution approving and adopting a student discipline waiver and consent agreement dated February 24th, 2022. 7.3, request permission to contract with Capstone Academy for 1 special education student for 2022 extended school year services at a cost of $11,768.25, beginning 7/11/2022 and ending 8/12/2022. 7.4, request approval of the board's committee's recommendation for expulsion of 1 16-year-old student after hearing and written report upon the conditions set forth in the report to the board. Looking for a motion to approve student services agenda items 7.1 through 7.4 as presented.
So moved, Case?
Mr. Case, Thank you. Mr. Hart, second. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
I
Oh,
have a-
sorry, Mr. Martin?
Right. I hope this is a typo, but in 7.3, that $11,760, is that for 1 month?
Dr. Faley?
Mr. Martin, that's the cost for the ESY program.
Oh, okay. For one special education student. I'm not sure I read this correctly then. For 7.3, well, maybe you can explain that to me, because the way it's written, it seems like it's for special education students. So it's for many students.
No, it's the tuition for that ESY program for that student,
For 1 month.
for the summer ESY program.
Okay. So then the dates are wrong. It says 7/11/22 and ending 8/12/22.
No, that's correct, the summer.
What's that? So it's 1 month. We're paying $11,000 for 1 month. Wow.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Under Technology and Media, 8.1, request permission to enter into a one-year agreement with JROTC, Inc. for ReadySign electronic signature software at a cost of $3,000 for 40 users and unlimited documents as attached. Looking for a motion for 8.1.
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Do we have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Operations, 9.1, request approval to use Boja Engineering as a professional service to complete a traffic study for permitting of Phase 1 of construction. Looking for a motion for 9.1.
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you.
Second case.
Mr. Case, do we have any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, 10.1, request approval to advertise bids for 2022-2023 per the attached bid schedule. 10.2, request permission to create a real movie club and establish a student activity account in the high school Student Activities Fund. Looking for a motion to approve Finance Agenda Items 10.1 and 10.2 as presented.
Negrini, so moved.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Oh, that probably shouldn't, hang on one second. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I got everything. Ms. McCray, thank you. Any discussion?
I just had a question. For
Yes.
10.2, do we know what kind of movies they're going to be watching? It didn't say in the thing, and I just wondered.
That's a good question. Maybe
And
they-
like,
yeah, maybe
in
they
terms of
pick,
copyright, I was just wondering, where are we streaming? Are we?
Do we, Dr. Faley, do we
know
have
any?
anybody that's connected to the movie Real Club?
I do not believe so, but I can follow up with you in the update this week.
I mean, it sounds interesting, sounds
Yeah,
fun.
sounds fun. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Okay, which brings us to committee reports. BCTC, Mrs. Casper.
Yes. Our last meeting was held at the West Campus on February 23rd. I just want to do a plug for Career Camp, which is back at BCTC. It's a great way for our 6th through 8th graders to explore a new career, and they can do that every day during the camp. Career Camp runs this summer from June 13th through the 17th, from 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. at the BCTC East Campus in Ole. The cost is $50 per camper, and will include a T-shirt and snacks. All campers should bring a lunch. The registration is now open on the BCTC website. During our meeting, we also had the good fortune of hearing Ms. Parks present the presentation that she went around to the sending districts to present the different career programs that are available to our middle schoolers. And my middle schooler, of course, came back and was excited about it as well. So she was thinking of doing the career camp. So thank you to Ms. Parks for her diligence in promoting the programs that are available to our students at BCTC. I just wanted to recognize our Wilson students who are receiving honors for this last grading period. Ryan Norman for Building Construction Occupations, Carrie Hunsinger for Protective Services Law Enforcement, Gabrielle Gonzalez for Service Occupations, Jacob Serrano for Automotive Collision, Grace Moyer for Business Management and Entrepreneurship, Janelle Belfort for Cosmetology, Daniel Antunes for Early Childhood Education, Kagan Boatner for Welding Technology. Also coming in second place for Cosmetology Nail Care at the Skills USA competition was Mackenzie Garcia, so congratulations to her. Our next meeting is Wednesday, March 23rd at the East Campus, and that's my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. Student Services Committee?
Services, yes. We met on Wednesday, March 8th, I think that was March 2nd. Yes. And we covered quite a few agenda items, and we had a lot of discussion during our meeting. The first one under Special Education Services, I just wanted to highlight that we are continuing to struggle with attracting and retaining paraprofessionals. We had a pretty lengthy discussion about this and addressed that it is a growing trend in public education, and many school districts around the area are struggling with this issue as well. Wilson, however, values the role of our paraprofessionals and provides one of the more competitive wages for this group of staff. Under Nursing and Health Services, we talked about experiencing a need for increased nursing coverage in our buildings as we're moving away from outsourcing any of their services. And I did want to just highlight that we are still offering COVID testing by appointment out of our operations building, although the numbers there are dwindling in terms of folks who are seeking testing. In terms of mental health counseling, we talked about some new online resources that could be made available to our staff and our communities around mental well-being and addressing specific issues. We also talked quite a bit about our measures around anti-bullying in our buildings. We talked about the extent of bullying in a lot of our buildings, especially recently as we relaxed as we made masking optional. We also talked about all the many efforts that our school district provides and has been doing even before the pandemic to try to alleviate bullying in our schools. We talked about the need to clarify to our community that there is only so much that our district can do, and that we cannot always punish or investigate issues that happen outside of the school in terms of our legal sort of barriers to being able to do that, for example, via social media formats. I do believe in part that our focus, our district-wide focus on the whole child, including social emotional learning, is going to have a lot more long-term benefits to alleviating bullying in our schools. I also wanted to commend Madison Fields, a Wilson High School ninth grader, who shared with us her personal, her proposal outlining some suggestions for dealing with bullying and other injustices that she's experienced and has witnessed experienced by others in her experiences at Wilson. So I want to thank Madison for her eagerness to help and to provide a student voice to potential solutions. And I would encourage other students like Madison to share their perspective and to participate as much as they can in alleviating this issue in their schools. We should really be looking at this issue as a collective one, and where we all can play a role at alleviating it. As far as equity and student experience, the next Equity Council meeting is March 15th, when we plan on discussing the council's goals and outline the next action steps. That's my report. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 6th at 4 p.m.
Thank you for your report, Mrs. Casper. BCIU, Dr. Kennedy.
The BCIU has not met since our last meeting, but I do have a report from the Curriculum Committee.
Sounds good.
Okay. The bulk of our meetings last time was spent when we were talking about the JROTC cybersecurity programming, and we had a really detailed introduction to that, and we're very excited as a curriculum committee to be able to offer that to our students. So we're in full support of it. We then talked about summer school, and we reviewed both our credit recovery program for students who need to retake a class, and we talked about the virtual original credit program for students who want to get ahead or take extra classes. We also talked about, and good news is that our Honor Spanish 3 is going to be awarded a dual credit course, which means they will get college credit for taking that class here at the high school. And as a college professor, I always encourage students, whenever you get a chance to take dual enrollment, take it. It's always better to go into college with more credits than you need. We talked about two requests we had from the prior meeting. One was an update on middle school, and Dr. Kachufos updated us on the middle school philosophy, and they are going to have a review of that. Even though we're proud of our middle schools, we just were awarded a Schools to Watch again. It's been a long time since they have reviewed the middle school program, and there's been a lot of new faculty and changes in philosophy. So they're going to go through a review process of our middle school philosophy. And along with that, we're also assessing our assessment. We're going to have an assessment audit, and Mr. Dillon is the one that is starting that process, and we're going to look at our types of assessment, when we give them, how we give them. We're going to look at it through the lens of everyone that's involved, chairs, teachers, and hopefully we'll get a better view of how we're assessing and why we're assessing, and if that aligns with our philosophy as a district. We talked then about BCTC, 5th through 7th grade, and how we're going to incorporate an earlier look at the possibility of attending the BCTC in those younger grades. And then we also talked about the summer camp program. And another good news item is Building Bulldogs. There's over 100 families that have been participating and registered to participate. And if you know anyone else that has a preschool age child that's ready to go to kindergarten next year, please encourage them. There are still Building Bulldogs dates left. And that's our report.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Berks EIT, Mrs. Schlossman. Okay, thank you. Extracurricular Committee, our next meeting is next Monday, March 14th at noon in the upstairs in admin. Facilities Committee, Mr. Case.
Sure, just a couple of quick updates. This afternoon, the bid opening happened for the Phase 1 of the high school projects. We're not going to speak about specific numbers because there are a whole bunch of add alternatives and deduct alternatives that Mr. Simcox will be busy sorting out so we can compare apples to apples. But we did have a good turnout. There were 5 electricians, 3 general contractors, and other contractors for plumbing and HVAC involved. So looking forward to seeing the results of that, and this will be all discussed at the joint meeting between Finance and Facilities on March 22nd. With regard to the Fields project, the advertisements were moved by a week. So instead of starting today, they'll be advertised on March 14th to 21st and March 28th. And the only other date that has shifted was the bid documents, which are now going to be available on March 15th instead of today. So that gives us an extra week for preparing better documents and also getting better bids. So it's a positive thing. We don't lose any other time. I think the solicitor winds up losing a week on reviewing, but that's it. So that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Finance Committee, Mr. Negrini.
We had a meeting earlier today in the pre-board room at 4:30. We discussed year-to-date financial reviews and projections. Some highlights, we are currently projected to be approximately $200,000 over budget for charter school enrollment. We are currently projected to be looking at a $600,000 deficit at year's end, which actually is better than what we had budgeted from the previous year. Food services participation year to date is up significantly from last year. Obviously, a lot has to do with the federal funding for both breakfast and lunch meals that has increased the number of meals that have been served this year. However, as I think I mentioned at the last meeting, we're going to continue to survey both students, parents, and administrators in all of the buildings to figure out how we can capture those increases in numbers of meals served for next year, despite the fact of losing out on the federal subsidies. We discussed a number of other items. We reviewed updates to the board policies for finance 600 through 606. Those first readings, I think, will be on next board meeting's agenda for review. A tax collector agreement and resolution will be appearing on our next board meeting for board approval. We discussed preschool and before and after care proposed tuition rates for 22-23. There's some additional work to be done, I think, on the proposed tuition rates for our preschool program. That will be discussed at our next finance meeting. A request for proposal for district-wide photography services is going to be sent out, and a recommendation to add a procurement card for the Director of Teacher and Learning. And finally, we worked through the 22-23 budget preparation. Still a lot of work to be done, a lot of good work that has already been done. We don't have to pass our final budget until June. A lot of that has to do with the governor's and the state budget. Hopefully that will be passed sooner than later towards our June deadline. As of right now, we are projected with our budget for next year to be looking at a $5.5 million deficit. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Yes, just to play on what Jay just said, the governor proposes budget. The Appropriations Committee are now listening to all sorts of folks competing for that money. The governor basically put the bulk of that into education. It's a one-time funding source, sort of like schools. They got this or some money one time, and now the caution is it's only once and it's done. So that's going on. There's been some really interesting discussions with that. One of the senators suggested that it's time to start paying some of the taxpayers back for the last couple of years of what they have gone through with COVID. and they suggested that there be a sales tax moratorium for 2 months in the summertime to allow folks to enjoy not free spending, but if you have the money available to buy product with no sale taxes, which is kind of unique. They figured that'd be about $500 million that would go back to the consumers and the public, which is kind of unique considering all the people are fighting for these funds. That was kind of unique. The another proposal was that the state income tax be reduced, and everybody said, well, that's a good thing, but then there's always that caveat that comes back to bite you. So they want to reduce it to 2.8%, but increase the tax on dividends and interest income or non-passive income, including if you have rental properties and you're not a professional, that'd be considered passive income. The problem with that is a lot of seniors and elderly folks rely on dividends, not so much interest income anymore, but that may change soon. But so that it's a double blade. Everybody wants to reduce taxes, but then there's a certain population that would impact more greatly than others. So a lot of things going on. There's several $1 billion out there floating around, not floating around, poor term, but it's in the coffers of the state, and whoever gets it, obviously, it's going to be interesting because everybody's going to want a piece of that pie. And right now, the bulk of that was designated for the schools, which is pretty much a publicity effort by the governor. Another item is, I think I saw, there was the fair funding lawsuit that's going on currently. March 10th, which I believe is this week, final arguments will commence, assuming there are no further objections with folks making presentations, that will commence. And there are, of the 500 and some school districts in the in the state, 15 support the fair funding, and it's going to be interesting because I think it's a black hole, and we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Martin. Human Resources, Mr. Hart.
No report.
Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Good evening, everyone. I just have a couple items under Wilson Good News. The first item, actually, Mrs. Casper touched on already, but I want to also congratulate Amanda Pennington and Mackenzie Garcia for placing first and second, respectively, in their Skills USA competition. Amanda placed first in culinary arts, and Mackenzie was second in cosmetology, which is just great news. We also would like to congratulate our Wilson High School boys and girls swimming and diving teams who won the PIAA District 3 Championship this past weekend. Great accomplishment, and we want to wish them luck as they move on to states. And then finally, this week marks National School Social Work Week as a way to celebrate school social workers across the nation and appreciate their work in helping students achieve academic success. School social workers are professionals within the social work field that work with teachers, parents, and school administrators. They help students deal with mental health and behavioral challenges and provide academic and classroom support. We would like to publicly recognize our amazing team of social workers, Michelle Zawilla, Allison Poplaski, and Erica Garcia, for the support they provide for our school community each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Troutman. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of highlights. It's springtime, and it is the Wilson Education Foundation time of year to do a whole bunch of fundraising. So first, in case you missed the Bulldog Blitz that came out last week, just wanted to tell you and give you a little bit of a plug for the family dinner pasta night that's coming up. We have 3 days. March 11th is the last day to get your orders in. $25 per family for a family-style meal. Each meal serves up to 4 people. You got meatballs and marinara sauce, baked ziti, salad mix, garlic bread, cookies, all sorts of good stuff up there. So meals are to be picked up, let's see, March 25th between 4:30 and 6 p.m. at the Lower House Cafeteria. There's going to be pamphlets, or not pamphlets, but flyers outside with a little barcode on the lobby on your way out if you want to scan it and learn all about it. If this meal is anything like the wing night that was done by the Wilson Food Service. It's going to be a great meal. So everything benefits the Wilson Education Foundation. Also, there is a Manor Golf Club golf tournament and spring party going on. So this is going to be Monday, April 18th at the Manor Golf Club. The time's 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. There's also, between that, there's a family fun 9-hole scramble. And at 1 p.m., there's an 18-hole shotgun scramble. Now, this is on a Monday, and I believe we are off. Yes. So get your foursomes together and get your ringer together and come on out, have a good time. There's going to be dinner, cocktails, live music, auctions, and raffles. The raffle's going to be available online. And again, if you want to have more information, there's a flyer out there with the QRC code. Go on out there and scan it. The flyers are out there. There's a meeting this Friday at 7:30 in the morning, located here, if anyone is interested. And that's our report. Thanks.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Case. Technology Committee, Mr. McCray.
No report.
Student Outreach, Ms. Maddie Negrini.
First of all, Wilson Minithon hosted their annual 12-hour dance marathon on Friday the 25th. Altogether, the students, community members, and staff raised over $74,000, and this all goes to the Four Diamonds Foundation. The Four Diamonds is a foundation that uses their proceeds for multiple different ways, including funding pediatric cancer research, but also aiding families with treatment costs. Wilson High School students and staff recently hosted an American Red Cross blood drive in the high school library. There were multiple students that were volunteering to help facilitate this event, and there were also a lot of people that donated their blood to give back to the community. And lastly, 16 FBLA club members from our high school qualified for the state competition this spring. These students will represent Wilson in the few coming weeks as they compete against over 300 school students in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Ms. Negrini. We have some public participation on agenda items, so Mr. Moravich.
Sure. Rules, excuse me, rules of public participation for school board meetings pursuant to the Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and board policy. The following are the rules of public participation. Individuals attending these meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is an opportunity to offer comments on matters that are or may come before the board. In particular, personnel or student matters may not be commented on, even if the employee, parent, or student speaking is speaking because of confidentiality laws and rules. If it relates to a question, the superintendent may assign an administrator or may speak directly to the speaker after the meeting to attempt to answer any questions raised by the speaker. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to any individual. Clapping, calling out, or cheering is not permitted, nor are conversations in the audience. Individuals may not approach the board tables. Individuals shall make their comments from the podium. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll provide the 1-minute warning. Any persons making threats of violence may be removed from the meeting or may be cited by local police. These expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is on the on the school district's website, embedded within board docs.
Thank you, Ms. Moravich. First, we have Brianna Kohler, redistricting.
Good evening. I would like to spend a few minutes talking about the redistricting that is in the works right now. I understand that in the next few years, our schools are expected to be overflowing, which is why we also have a plan in place for a new school to be built. And I am asking for you guys to reconsider the districting plan and really take into consideration how this will affect the families of our community. As a Wilson alumni, I remember the stress and the emotional strain that occurred in around the early 2010s, that Berkshire Heights area, when that was supposed to originally be transferred over to Southern Middle School rather than West, which was when I would have been part of the transfer. And separating that area from the rest of my peers that I went to school with, just the thought of that put a lot of strain on myself as well as members of my family. As a child, I was nowhere near the person I am today. There is no way I would have been able to speak out to people like this or really have some of the social connections that are important for many people, especially at a young developing age. And I wasn't the student who would fit in or that had a lot of friends. I was extremely timid and had very few people I was comfortable being around. And when the talks of going to a completely new school with people that I never met, I was nervous. The idea of being sent somewhere alone with the previously formed friend groups and the different social aspects that were seen at Southern, it felt like a nightmare at that point, especially for someone who was as shy as I was, who had as much as an effect of me as I did, if not more, was actually my mother. Being a parent of someone who wanted the best for their child academically, socially, and emotionally was as terrified, if not more, than I was. And knowing that her child, who was not as socially inclined as many, would be pulled away from everything they know and be thrown into a new school with new people for the big transition through middle school. Even with the attempts of expanding social skills through extracurriculars, she knew that I would struggle. I remember the effect that this idea had on my own family, but also those in my community who lived in the area I did. While for me, fortunately, the redistricting was postponed, today, or I believe it was in the last 2 years, the redistricting of that area has occurred, and I've seen how it affected a lot of my peers, or their children at this point. And I just ask that you please keep the families of these children, like I was, in your minds, as well as those when you think about redistricting, especially with the new school opening and the redistricting occurring. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Dwight Wegman, proposed capital expansion.
Good evening, everybody. I worked at a large local corporation for 35 years. And one thing I learned during that time was that any capital expenditure received a thorough review to make sure the money was being spent properly and wisely. As the dollar figure increased, the scrutiny became more and more intense. A project approaching $100 million would receive extraordinary scrutiny because of the obligation to the shareholders. The capital expansion at Wilson deserves that kind of review to make sure we are spending the people's money wisely. Members of this board, the people of Wilson are your shareholders. And are you giving this project proper scrutiny? This board needs to scrutinize this project as if you were personally spending $100 million. This is not government grant money. It's not monopoly money. It's the taxpayers' money. Just because the administration proposes a plan does not mean you should be a rubber stamp. We are all experiencing the inflation that shows no sign of letting up. That inflation will translate directly into added spending in this capital plan. I am unsure how you can even quantify cost overruns in this inflationary environment. The position of this administration is that the expansion is based upon planning and discussions held over the past 2 years. My personal belief is that the fundamental assumptions of this capital expansion need to be reviewed with the community again. Much has changed in the past 2 years. COVID and our response to COVID, the teaching of critical race theory and the adopted equity policy, and now the inflation we are experiencing has changed everything from 2 years ago. Many parents and families have opted out of in-school instruction for private schools, homeschooling, and charter schools. The current trajectory of school policy will only encourage that trend. Will all the residential construction developments be built in the near future? The current inflationary environment will surely slow down economic activity, and the projected enrollment increases could very well not materialize. We need to slow down and rethink this capital expansion from the beginning. Do you really want to pursue building an additional school that may not be needed in the long term? Let's pursue the redistricting and potentially modular classrooms for enrollment increases until we can be sure of the enrollment numbers and don't spend the taxpayers' money on unnecessary facilities. I would much rather have this administration and board focus on educating our children than questionable facilities. Just this week, Future Ready PA reported that just 18.5% of Wilson students were proficient in English language arts literature, compared to 55% of the state overall. I think that's where we need to put our focus. Thank you.
Val Delp, right sizing a new elementary.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to share a couple of suggestions that I thought of on the right sizing and the proposed new elementary school. First, I thought maybe it would make sense to consider sending some sort of communication to all the elementary parents, asking if maybe any families would volunteer to move their children to a new school next year. Maybe would have a few families volunteer that might help kind of minimize the number of families upset about being asked to move if they didn't want to. And second, I would think also maybe looking at some other contributing factors on the projections and enrollment growth, such as are there any studies out there on what impact the pandemic had on the number of new marriages and births? Was there any sort of reduction over the last 2 years in our community or just overall? And also, have you looked at all at the percentage of kids that were pulled from public schools to be homeschooled or go to private schooling in this district? And are those numbers expected to stay the same, increase, or decrease? I'm not sure that just focusing on the number of new homes being built in the district creates a clear picture. My family actually moved into one of those new construction communities last year, and a lot of my new neighbors were already living in the Wilson School District. Now, obviously, I don't know if families outside of the district moved into their old homes, but that's something to consider. Third, could you delay starting design plans for the new elementary, at least until we have more information on the bids for the high school project and decisions on whether we move forward with the entire project or have to cut pieces due to budget restrictions? I just feel this would be a more fiscally responsible approach. Also, why not consider using the building plans from existing elementary schools rather than hiring an architect to design a new plan? That might save some money as well.
1 minute.
As a former teacher myself, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to effectively teach when you have large class sizes, but I also see the potential impact to the taxpayers. I've had many of my financial advisory clients who live in this district share with me their financial hardships they have faced over the last 2 years. At a time when gas prices are soaring, grocery trips are costing more, and stock market volatility is creating stress on sources of retirement income, a school tax increase would impact their financial burden. So I just ask that you please not jump so quickly into the next building project and further consider those impacts on the community. And lastly, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing smiles back to our schools again. My daughter goes to Wilson Preschool, and when I told her she didn't have to wear a mask in school anymore, she smiled, hugged me, and said, "I love you, Mama." So to me, that speaks volumes as to how masks were taking some joy out of her school experience. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for your comments. The last one is Tammy Keener, but I think she left. So that is the end of our public participation for non-agenda items. Do we have any new items or conversation from the board?
Dr. Fadley, can we just speak to Mr. Wegman's comments about those numbers regarding proficiency and how the way that the data was collected and presented is misleading? I mean, we're not a school that has those kind of figures. So I think it deserves clarification since it was brought out tonight in public comment.
Certainly, Mr. Negrini. Dr. Trickett, can you please come to the microphone and share the analysis that we've communicated with a number of individuals in the school district as well as the board, because there's nothing more irritating than when the Pennsylvania Department of Education publishes data but doesn't explain it. So let's explain it.
Sure, absolutely. And Mr. Wegman had a great brought up a great point at the end, and we do wish that there would be a disclaimer attached to the data, and that people you would reach out when there are questions, and we're thankful for the community members that did reach out since that newspaper article was released. So essentially what happens in a secondary environment, specifically in the high school, is we have 3 exams that measure students, their mastery of certain content areas, standards in 3 disciplines. One of those areas of discipline is literature. And at Wilson High School, we have a trigger course, which is called English 10. It's our 10th grade English Language Arts class. And at the end of that year, at the end of their sophomore year, students will take the Keystone exam. Historically, our students here at Wilson, our kids, score in the mid-80s. The last time that this percentage was released, it was, I believe, around 88% proficient, which is exceptional. It's a testament to our community, our kids, and our teachers, and our curriculum. However, what was reported in the newspaper and on the Future Ready PA Index score is actually not representative of the true data set of the current senior class. So when you look back to spring of 2020, we weren't in school. Schools across the Commonwealth were closed. So none of our students who were sophomores at the time in the trigger course took the Keystone exam. So what happened was the state said unilaterally that student scores would be proficient. So anyone that was in that trigger course at the end of that year, nearly 400 students at Wilson, automatically were pushed through in the system as proficient, which means that they are graduate eligible. They met that criteria. However, students come in and out of our school district on a daily basis, and some students weren't in that trigger course for a variety of reasons. So what was reported was the remainder of students who may have taken that exam, excluding the kiddos who were in the trigger course, which is the large majority of our student population. And that's not just true in literature, but literature is where you see that stark difference between the 88 and I believe the 18.5.
So, Mr. Negrini, in other words, don't always believe what you read in the newspaper, because most of the time, well, not most of the time, many times it doesn't represent the whole set of facts. So, as Dr. Trickett has said, we encourage our community to reach out if they have questions regarding something that they don't understand that's reported from the media. So I would also say it this way. Academic success is alive and well. It's growing in the Wilson School District, and it's growing because our students are treated not just as test takers, but they're treated as total human beings. So our students are treated from a philosophy where we look at their needs on a daily basis when they come to school, not only their academic needs, but their social needs, their needs at home, whether or not they're hungry. All of those factors go into making a school system that truly cares about individuals. So I said this back in 2017, and I'm going to say it again. When I came here in 2017, I said, as long as I'm superintendent of schools, we will not chase test scores. Not that test scores aren't important, but we're going to do the things that matter in the classroom. We're going to provide programs and opportunities for kids like what you heard earlier this evening that stretch people to be better. We're going to encourage our kids to go to the career camps in the summertime. We're going to provide transportation for them. We're going to provide interventions in the summertime for the kids who need it most. And when those tests come around, PSSA, Keystones, whatever you want to call it, AP exams, our kids in Wilson will outperform their peers in this county time and time again. So let's wait and let's get the real scores when they come out, when our kids actually take the test. And then let's decide where we stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley and Dr. Trickett. Any other board discussion? Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, thank you.